Hey folks, thanks for coming over to Capitalism for Good. This is a part of a larger project where I am on a mission to interview 100 business leaders about the positive impact that they have on their internal and external communities. It is through these interviews that we will dig into how we can use the ways in which we make and spend our dollars in order to benefit the greater good. Folks, today we have Angela Tipton. She is the co-founder of Tipton Franklin, a marketing company focused on helping small biotech and ag tech companies with their individual strategic marketing goals. We'll actually speak to her business partner, the other co-founder, Travis Franklin, in the next upcoming interview episode. And just as a reminder, there are links in the show notes to her company and all of the organizations that we talk about. And they are also all mentioned in the company mentions document on the Patreon as well. So check those things out. Angela and I talk about the importance of experts helping communicate with the public and potential investors, as well as internally to other science collaborators. Kind of break down what that world looks like from an outsider's perspective and go through how her career turns have helped get her to the point where she is now, trying to truly utilize her skills to help these science-focused businesses get to where they need to go. We also get into this really great conversation about the value of mentorship and how, just as a person, to balance out the chaos in order to thwart burnout, especially when you care so much about what you're doing professionally and you're trying so hard to leverage your skills for the greater good. So let's just jump on in. Enjoy. Say it. How did you get to where you are today?
Yeah. So I usually like to start at the beginning because I think that helps convey the story a lot simpler than I otherwise could. But I really started my career journey in really undergrad. I was always really passionate about science. And ever since I was really little, in fact, I still remember to this day, one of my biggest dreams as a kid was I always wanted to be an astronaut. But an astronaut doesn't exactly have a direct career path. And of course, I kind of meandered from that here and there. But I always loved science and I always believed what it could do for the world and all of the different things that it offered. So that was what I set out to do when I started out my career, or when I started out school. I got my bachelor's degree in biology, and my intention had always been to go on and pursue either a master's in science or a PhD. In fact, even when I was an undergrad, I kept switching ideas that I had for myself between what degree did I want to do. I started out in imaging science, of all things. And then eventually I changed my major to bioinformatics. And then I decided, no, biology is a little bit more for me. I at one point had a double major in physics. So I kind of was all over the place in some senses when it came to science, but I stuck with science more or less until I graduated. And I decided that I'd been in school for so long, I wanted to take a bit of a break in my education and really spend some time getting to understand myself and how I worked and what I like to do within work and so on, which ended up being actually a very good thing that I ended up doing that because, as you will note over time, I did end up changing my career path in ways that I did not initially expect. And when I started my career officially after I finished my bachelor's degree, I started working in a range of roles in research and development. I worked for a while. My first really full-time major job was working as a molecular biologist and a microbiologist, and really enjoyed the nature of that work. But as I started working in labs, I started to realize that although I love science, my skill set and my passions were different in ways I didn't expect. And what I mean by that is I love science, but sitting at a bench top doing the same thing day in and day out was just not the greatest fit for my personality. I'm more outgoing than your traditional scientist. I'm not necessarily the most outgoing person around, but it's hard for me to just focus on just one thing day in and day out for hours at a time and not talk to anyone. It got kind of tiring after a while, to be honest. And I knew the value of what I was doing and fully believed in that. So that never changed at all. But I started to get a little bit curious about, what else could I do with this? I still wanted to stay in science. And it was around this time that I was actually working as a molecular biologist that I started talking to my manager at the time about what I wanted to do for my advanced degree. And I talked to him about getting that master's in science or a PhD. And I'm trying to remember now what degrees I was even considering at the time. I think I was throwing a degree, an advanced degree in either molecular biology or microbiology at the time. That's kind of what I was thinking about. But one of the things I started tossing around and he strongly encouraged me to consider was an MBA. And at the time when I was thinking about it, it was more of this seems like a fun idea, but I'm not sure if it's right for me. And for whatever reason, a few years later, the more I thought about it, the more I considered the options for that, the more the MBA just started to make sense to me. And I did. I did ultimately end up going and pursuing my MBA. It wasn't something that I expected that I would do or that would make sense, but in hindsight, it was absolutely the right decision for me. I continued my career while I was in an MBA program. So as you might imagine, it was a lot to balance having a full-time job and going to school, but it was also a really fine balance where I was able to continue working and building up my skill set while I continued my education. And at the time, I was working for a Fortune 500 company in research and development. I was working in a greenhouse environment and research and development. And it was another one of those jobs. So I made that switch from my first job to that one, and then had started my degree. And again, although I really loved what I was doing in science, it was more of that heads down, really focused, that really introverted, doing the same thing day in and day out. And I just knew it just wasn't quite the right fit for me. I loved the nature of what I was doing, but the work itself was just not the right personality fit. And I just knew that. Eventually my department closed down and I did navigate to another job while I was continuing my MBA, and that was working for a different Fortune 500 company, and I became a lab manager, and I worked in a QC lab that did seed health testing. And that's where I got a little bit more exposure to administration and management and leadership. And I started to see that felt a little bit more aligned for me. I was still able to be involved with the lab and the work behind the scenes with science, but I had a bit of a different spin on it, and it felt more fitting somehow. It wasn't a perfect fit. I was there for, I think, 5 or so years, and a lot of the work I did fulfill me. And in fact, I had some great experiences where I got to travel the world and meet with colleagues in all sorts of different places and troubleshoot on things like protocols around the world, which was in itself a very fun and very engaging challenge. And I did love the nature of that. But as I finished my MBA and I got exposure to different classes, I started to really feel aligned with marketing and more of those business type things. And I started to think that, this feels like it's aligned with what I'm passionate about and what my skill set is in. And around this time too, there was a lot of public backlash during there was a lot of outcry about GMOs being in food. And one of those big scary companies at the time that was being talked about was Monsanto. So I really got a firsthand view of a lot of that. And what I realized about that specifically, and a lot of other things too, but there was a really big falling out that resulted from not being able to communicate properly, not being able to share the story that was happening behind the science. And that led to a lot of very valid concerns on the part of consumers that wanted to know what was going on. Now, I understood both sides of that story because working in the field and in the industry, as a scientist, you know that your intellectual property is incredibly valuable. So there's this fine line between securing that intellectual property and making sure that you're not just exposing all those company secrets. But on the other hand, you also have to be able to communicate the value of what you're doing in a way that's understandable, which is very hard to do in the science world. It's very
Mhm.
technical. There's a lot of technical jargon that just isn't very easily understood unless you're in it day in and day out and you understand that. And that's not to say that it's not understandable, but it is, it's complicated stuff. And unless you're a deep specialist in those areas, it can be very difficult to understand. And that's really where my passion bloomed for marketing and communications, because I saw that there was a very big need there to be able to communicate that science better, but in a way that was also mindful of what the company needs were, that allowed them to grow and protect their intellectual property. And that's really how I ended up finding myself with Tipton Franklin. Is we decided, so my co-founder and myself, Travis, decided that we wanted to do something that enabled us to uplift other businesses. And in my space, that's really focused on the biotech world, to uplift those smaller businesses, and especially those that are having trouble communicating that value. It's a hard thing to do. The value of the work you're doing, I think, for those of us that have been or were scientists, we understand that, we get that, but communicating that and sharing that, that's really hard. And as a scientist, you want to share the great work that you're doing with the world. That's why most scientists get into the work that they're doing, because they're so passionate about it. But it's hard to share that story in a way that makes sense, that's understood, that is still valid in the ways that you want to communicate. So that's a very long explanation for your answer, but that's the gist of how I got to where I am today.
Yeah, I first of all took a good jillion notes. So many things I want to jump into and like dive really deep in, but I'm gonna start with like kind of just what I think is like a funny anecdote that might help people that haven't been in the science world kind of understand maybe how complicated all of this is, and how like you can hear these types of things. You can hear scientists talk, or you can hear things that are going on at Modesto, or you can hear things that are coming out about infectious diseases during the pandemic or whatever that
Right.
is, and think that it is simple and it's black and white, and there's just so much gray, but there's also so much technical behind it, and the technical pieces are important. And like, I don't know, while you were talking, I was like, oh, even just like you were QC in a lab as a lab manager, troubleshooting protocols, therefore you have to be incredibly detail oriented. I would have had no idea how to draw that conclusion had I not worked in research administration and like talk to scientists on a daily basis. And
Sure.
to the point where when I first started back in 2017, I myself was making a career switch. So I jumped from fundraising, but from like the mental health, behavioral health side of things. So I had no idea what was going on in infectious diseases, molecular biology, like any of these kinds of things. And I one day had to take notes and then edit it into a report to submit to our sponsor to make sure, you know, in the terms of efficiency and making sure T's are crossed and I's are dotted, a second set of eyes goes on it to make sure you're giving the people what you said you were going to give them. I'm supposed to be in charge of it. I think I'm a relatively smart person. I'm going through all of this stuff. I'm taking what I think are stellar notes. I luckily befriended a scientist who was everyone. My name is Andrea. Everyone at work called me Andy. His name was also Andy. He was boy Andy, and I befriended him, and he very graciously took me under his wing. And I was like, "Hey, will you, before I send this back, this is the first time I've ever done this, will you go over my notes?" And he called me laughing because they had been talking about monoclonal antibodies, and they were talking about MABs. I, first of all, misunderstood them, wrote MAP, MAP, everywhere. at one point someone caught me and he was like, no, Mab, M-A-B, still didn't understand that it is lowercase m, capital A, underscore, like, and it is just such a small thing, but had I turned in that report, someone would have been like, you're an idiot, this person is not qualified. What are you talking about? Because everyone in the science world knows what a monoclonal antibody abbreviation is. But it's those kinds of things that like they get lost on the layperson
Yeah.
and and that is just an abbreviation. That's not
Yeah.
even what does a monoclonal antibody do? How does it fit into all of these kinds of things? And I think it's so important to have someone like yourself who has the experience and the understanding of the technical side of the world to be able to communicate that and almost like be that communication liaison to other people because these details that you are good at matter. That communication, that people piece matters so much. And I I one am incredibly thankful that there are folks like you who are focused on those kinds of things. But I wonder, like, from your perspective, what are those types of hurdles that you have seen and you've experienced that you're helping these like small companies with? I mean, we could go down a rabbit hole of just talking about like small startup-y, small business scientists that are just like, hey, I'm just a scientist. I don't have the marketing background. I don't have the business, the financial background, the all of this. I'm a good scientist. That's why I'm doing this.
Mhm.
Like, they need all of this help. They need all of these things.
Yeah. So to your point, it is. It's very complicated because just being a scientist and doing the work that you're doing, there's so much complexity there. There's so much technical know-how you have to be a good scientist. It's really a luxury that you can't afford to also be proficient and spend time on the business side, on the marketing side. Now, there are some very few rare individuals I've met that can do it,
Of course. Yeah.
but having both of those, it really is, it's such a complex skill set. And those skills don't really intersect because you have the science piece that is very technical oriented, that's generally more suited for people that tend to be more introverted. Not always, there are definitely exceptions to that, but it does. It requires a different kind of mindset, skill set, and all of those things, and you don't usually get someone that's good at that side and also at the business marketing side. It's very, very hard to get both. And again, I've met a few individuals that have been fantastic
Oh, yeah.
resources and good sources of support, but it's hard to have both sides because both sides in their own ways are so demanding, and necessarily so in order for you to do the great work that you're doing. For a scientist to be a great scientist, they have to be really focused on those technical pieces. So it's to think about the business side of it. It's just not so doable in most cases to be able to have that side of it too. So what I and what Travis, my co-founder, can also help with is really helping simplify that process. We're really focused on helping scientists and helping the businesses behind them build a set of systems and processes that help them attract the leads and the business that they're looking for. And we can start with some really simple things. We like to start with strategy. That's something that we really emphasize is really important. But when it comes to your strategy, you need to make sure that you're targeting the right people. Is it investors? Are you trying to target other scientists? Are you trying to educate principal investigators? Are you trying to educate even patients? So there are a lot of different levels that go along with that. And the kind of material and content you need for those different audiences can vary drastically depending on what your goals are and who your target audience is and all of those things. And then what we do is we just help simplify that process because it's a lot. It's a lot to think about. And when you're heavy in the science, you just don't have the time to focus on that. You're trying to make great science and you're trying to make the impact on the world. And that's where you should be focused. That's where we can come in and really add value and make things streamlined, make things easier so that you don't have to think about it and worry about it.
Yeah. You also just brought up another really good point. And first of all, I'm going to have you clarify because now I'm like got a little bit of a liaison brain. So you distinguish. So you're from the marketing piece, you're depending on who you're distinguishing who you're attracting as far as like leads or customers or whoever that is between your audience, or sorry, between investors, principal investigators. We explained it, principal investigator.
You want me to explain that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So a principal investigator is someone that is leading science in some initiative in one way or another. So trying to think of a good example, but going back to my microbiology roots, it's someone that is they have some sort of goal in mind or some kind of research that they are trying to achieve that has some, it doesn't always have a specific outcome. It might, depending on what that science is about, but a principal investigator is someone that is going to be diving deep into that research and is really leading those efforts to uncover something with some intended goal.
Yeah. So if that is your target audience, would the goal be to maybe connect to principal investigators that have collaborative science so that they can work off of each other? Or maybe one is at one stage that's going to hand off to another at like a preclinical development stage or something like that,
It
or
could be.
something else?
It absolutely could be. That could be one thing. Another way that I've worked with principal investigators on a company basis is if you are introducing some sort of new technology that you feel is going to be novel, that's going to advance research, you might work with the principal investigator and get them interested to buy into this technology, to test it out, even to potentially QC this technology and further improve it. So it really just depends on what your goal is and what your company is doing. But so there can be all sorts of different ways to work with principal investigators, whether it's, yes, to get them to collaborate together, to get great minds together, and to figure out between their different worlds how this research comes together. Maybe it's someone that understands microbiology really well, and there's another scientist that's studying different diseases, and they're starting to uncover that there are certain bacteria that contribute to these diseases, and maybe you get those scientists together to figure it out. So there's all sorts of different ways that you can possibly work together, and that's one of the things that I think is just amazing and fun about science, is that the possibilities are endless. And when you get great minds together, sometimes you just don't know what the outcome is going to be. And that's what I love to elevate.
Yeah. Can we talk about that? That's another thing that I wrote down that I would love to dig into is like the world is gray, which is an interesting way. Now I'm going to get a little philosophical about like science communication here, but like the world is gray, but it's interesting for, I would think, someone who's not scientifically minded to think about how the world is gray because science, as we know and typically learn early on in our education, we learn it based on like facts. Like this is true because of this, kind of like in a math way. And then it gets really confusing sometimes and kind of convoluted when you're like, well, but it is evolving because we are discovering new information. We are collaborating, which leads us to new things. We're developing new novel technology that also changes the way in which we interact with different science outcomes, whether it's something from like talking about like biotech and ag tech, like seeds that you're using to grow and GMOs and those kinds of things, like that stuff kind of changes, but yet we have this idea that science is fact. And I think sometimes I wonder if I'm gonna like zoom out a bit in 2025, like if we're looking at science, is do you have any sense of like, now I'm just trying to ask you to like solve the world's problems here, but like, is that why science is so like confusing and maybe like there's some controversy, there's some views that maybe it's like under attack in some ways, or we're defending it because it's blah blah blah. Like there are all of these different like headlines and talking points that we could get into, and I don't know how I don't want to like spread any of those kinds of things, but I do think that it's important to be like, but it is facts, but your knowledge can expand. And I think that that's
Absolutely.
helpful to have someone, again, in the marketing that can understand that and it can also understand how if you're talking to other scientists, they often know and understand that. They live that, so you don't have to have that type of a conversation. But if you're talking about like to the public, to non-scientists, like communication is different. And I think it's important to have a a knowledgeable team that is behind you and supporting you and is like kind of plugged in to help out your company to help tailor that information from one way or the other. That is a big loaded question, but guess at the end of the day, I'm curious kind of what your take and what your experience and kind of viewpoint of that side of the house is with like
Yeah,
what's going on today.
yeah, absolutely. I love this question because I think this is a really important question. I think this is a really good one for us all to consider. The way I have looked at it, the only thing really that trumps science is better science. And yes, we are always learning and evolving. I mean, think about medicine and science 50 years, 100 years ago. What we know now compared to then is it's hard to even describe because the things that we did back then that was at the time considered good science or good medicine or good patient care is nothing in comparison to what we would do today. And it's something too that for me very often makes me think, and I wonder often, what are the things that we're doing today that 100 years from now we're going to say, wow, they were doing that.
Yeah, they
But
believed
that
what?
exactly. But that's the thing about science is that it is non-biased. It doesn't care. It doesn't have emotion. It is just facts. It is just fact based on the different research that we're doing. So all that to say is that yes, there are a lot of things that we don't know. That's true, and that is always going to be the case with anything. I mean, we don't know what comes after life, right? But we all have different beliefs about that, and none of those beliefs are invalid. I would say you're entitled to believe what you want to believe, but when it comes to science, the only thing that trumps science is when you have that better science, and it is going to continue to evolve. That is just the nature of how it works. That's the nature of our research. As we make new discoveries, we can make discoveries that compound and build upon those. So we're not going to know it all. Something research that is near and dear to me that I follow very closely, because I have Crohn's disease, is I like to follow what is going on in the world of Crohn's disease and what we know today compared to 20 years ago, even just 5 years ago. It's grown infinitely. Now that doesn't mean that today we have a cure for Crohn's. We don't. It's something that we'd like to get to at some point, but we do have better treatments. So that's something. It's continuing to evolve, it's changing. And as we learn more, our treatments get better. They get more focused, they get more intentional, and they have better outcomes for patients too. So that's really the goal, is to just continue improving upon science. No, we're probably not going to solve world hunger. We're not going to, figure out what's going on in the afterlife. It's going to take us many, many years to uncover the root causes of some of these diseases and things like that. That doesn't make it useless. It doesn't make it valid or any of those things. We're continuing to learn. And that's one of the things that I love about science, is it gives us that tool, that method of continuing to learn and improving on the existing systems that we have.
Amen. Okay, I want to kind of take us on a turn a little bit into like how you are helping these smaller businesses in like being able to be of an assistance to them as a third party marketing team and kind of get into, if you're willing, like the finances of it. And that like I think sometimes I'm just trying to think of like globally as an entrepreneur, as a small business leader, as someone who has, you're wearing a lot of different hats from that standpoint, and you're trying to do all of these different things. Often finances are tight. You're trying to like be very careful about what's going on, but it also, you understand that like you do need to call an expert sometimes to be able to help out with certain things. But I wonder if in your world, if this has been your experience, that sometimes there's like an aversion of like, oh, I don't know if I can afford your services. We're really tied right now. Like, I don't know, I don't even know what that would cost. Or like, yeah, marketing would be really great, but we're just a small company, so we don't really need anything big, giant. We don't need Google Ads. We don't need all this, blah, blah, blah. But like having a third party marketing team to be able to help you out with those things, give you a strategy, give you a roadmap, one, probably like individualized help based upon what you actually need. That's going to be different for everyone. But also, like, I imagine it probably ebbs and flows a little bit. Like, you might be like really ingrained in helping out a company for a little while, and maybe it's like a couple months long project. Maybe it's support for a whole year, or you're just, working a few hours at a time. Maybe it's really intense at sometimes. Can you talk about like that part of the piece of like what you offer and how, maybe a little bit more of like the how you're helping folks?
Absolutely. And yeah, to your point, marketing is one of those things that sometimes feels like a bit of an unaffordable luxury. And I get that. It is something that feels like it can be sometimes more than you need, or you might initially think that. And I get that. But the way I like to convey the value of marketing is really what marketing does well is it serves as a bridge. It serves as a bridge that is really between this problem and the solution that the audience is looking for. So you as a company have a solution, your audience has a problem, and marketing serves as that bridge. At least in my opinion, good marketing serves as that bridge, as it should. So that's really the simplest version of what I would say when it comes to marketing strategy. That's what we do. Now, that said, there are, of course, a lot of layers that go into that. Starting with that marketing strategy. So what Travis and I like to do is we like to start with where companies are at. And sometimes it's, hey, I just need a case study to convey the value of this drug we're developing or whatever it is. So we can do that. And that in itself can be a very valuable tool. Now, I much prefer to focus on the strategy early on because I find, especially having worked with a number of companies, you tend to need your strategy a lot earlier than you think you need it. Or in a lot of cases, companies will come in long after they've needed it and they have all sorts of bits and pieces of things, which sometimes they have some great material, which is a great foundation to start from. But if you don't have a clear strategy and you don't know in what ways you're using it, how it's appealing to your audience, how it's driving ROI for your business, you can be really scattered and you can actually waste a lot of money doing that. And I have seen a number of companies do that. So that is why I strongly encourage from the beginning, or at least as early as feasible, let's take a focus and let's spend some time on your strategy so that we can make sure that the tools, the resources you have are aligned in the ways that they need to be for your business. That case study is being put in the places that it needs to attract the audience you're looking for, and that it's worded in such a way that it's attracting the right audience. So yes, we can do those smaller pieces, and we've done that. I don't mind doing that. In fact, it's sometimes nice to just put together a case study that can do something or whatever it is. I'm using case study as an example, but those in themselves can be very valuable tools. But having been in this space for a number of years, I do find the businesses just come to us and the work that we do a lot later than really would be ideal for them. Because if it's so late down the road and there are already so many different pieces that are all over the place, it can be a lot harder to pull those pieces together. And it takes more time to do that, to build a seamless strategy. So if you get in it sooner, you can do a better job of attracting investors so that you can get money brought into your business and you can continue funding your research or whatever it is you're doing. You can get more interest on, I'll make something up again, on social media, so you can get attention from principal investigators or whoever else it is. It just helps to put those pieces in earlier if you can do that. That isn't feasible for every business, and I can certainly appreciate that, especially in light of the economy we're in these days. It's harder and harder to do that, but the sooner you can get in, the better it tends to be.
Yeah, I am wondering also with part of the services that you provide, having that individualized support, being able to start with like figuring out where are you now, then go to the goals and like figure out what's really needed, what's the plan here. I wonder if that, or maybe how that works with your personality, is someone who um had a quite a journey along your career. You changed your degree, your plan many different times. You've kind of like jumped from thing to thing. Do you think that that's just part of your personality to be able to like have all of these very different interests and like need to be able to switch topics in comparison to someone who might like if you had stayed it is like a technician in the lab and you're just not, this is way oversimplifying it, but doing the same thing over and over again. If you were
Mhm.
pipetting alone in a room all day or whatever that is, like you really took like the exact 180 of that to, I imagine your day looks different every single day now. Is that it all
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah. Yeah, my day does look very different than it did back then. And I do think that that is just something that appeals to my personality. I think that's something that makes me good at what I do, frankly, because if I didn't have my head on a pivot and looking for all these different things, I'm very closely in tune with what is going on in the market, what is going on in the world of science. And it helps me to be really paying attention to these things. It helps me serve businesses better, it helps me serve clients in better ways that are going to drive value for them. It, I think that if I just focused on staying in the lab, I would have missed so many of these things. And yeah, I might be in different places at different times, depending on what I'm doing, but that does make me a good strategist. It means that I am paying attention to what is going on in the market. I'm paying attention to what's going on in science. I know what is happening behind the scenes from a technical standpoint, but I also know how to look ahead. So I can be that middle ground for scientists or for even business leaders within these companies that are just so focused on the work that they're doing. And that's where your attention should be focused, is on what you are doing as a company. And that's where I can come in. That's where my co-founder Travis can come in, and we can make things really simple. Take that off of your plate so that you can focus on what you need to focus on within your business, making the science successful, whether it's getting through clinical trials, it's making this new development with the technology you're using, whatever it is, we can make that process a lot easier for business leaders and scientists.
Yeah. So you've mentioned your co-founder Travis a couple of times, who we will speak to in the future. But I am curious of having that dynamic of having someone else to be able to be on your team. Can you talk a little bit about like how you guys balance each other out? How do you divide up the workload? How did you guys get together? Like how did that all start and how does it work together now?
Yeah, absolutely. So Travis, I have known my entire life. Travis is my cousin. So
Oh,
we've known
that's
each
so
other.
cool.
Yeah, we've known each other for a very long time, of course. And we had a few conversations over the years of both of our careers, where initially when we had started out our careers, we were in very different places. Travis had started in marketing long before I did, but he was doing other things in marketing. So he tends to focus on the ag tech side. So we do the biotech and ag tech marketing. I am much more focused on the biotech side based on my background. He's done a lot more with farmers. And over the years, our careers started to converge, and we started having conversations about, hey, we're doing kind of similar things. How can we get our minds together, and how can we turn this into something that is going to really bring a lot of value to businesses? And it was really fun to see how our conversations evolved over time. And then we decided to get together with our business efforts and see what we could do together. So Travis and I think balance each other out really well. I'm really good at focusing on the marketing strategy for biotech businesses, And Travis is really good at focusing on the nitty-gritty specifics, the collateral pieces. He does some of the strategy too, and he's great at that as well. And that's why we tend to focus a lot on strategy. That's something that we can both offer. But what he does and what I do are actually very different. He does a lot more on the AI side. I'm sure he'll talk to you a lot about that too. And he can use that in certain ways that really delivers some interesting and unique value. He's really, a lot of the stuff he's done is really on the cutting edge of AI, which I think is really exciting and very timely based on where we're at. And I tend to focus a lot more on those business strategies for biotech businesses to help them attract the audiences that they're looking for, whether it's getting revenue for the business from investors or it's appealing to patients or principal investigators, whatever that is. So yeah, I mean, we work on a lot of projects collaboratively. We often communicate about those things. So it's not like we're doing just things in our own kind of silos. We do work together quite a bit. But that said, he has his specialties and I have mine. And I think we do a great job of balancing each other on that.
Yeah. Another thing that I would love to kind of talk to, I'm going to, again, take us on another left turn here, but I'm going to take us back to when you were once again getting ready to or on the precipice of making a change with your career, and you were talking to your manager about how you wanted to pursue a master's in science or something else within the science field in higher education. And you had a manager who it sounds like served as a little bit of a mentor who encouraged you to get that MBA. And I'm finding that that has been well, it seems probably obvious on the surface, but it's cool to like hear the stories about like having a mentor truly be like a pivot to be like, I'm an outsider looking in at your skill sets and the things that you are naturally very good at, and I'm going to reflect something back to you that maybe you should consider this because you could really do something cool there. And I wonder about what role does mentorship play in both getting you to where you are, including that piece, but also like how have you, as you have grown, started to serve as that kind of mentorship? I mean, obviously your job in general, like you're mentoring folks, you're walking them through what they need as far as the marketing piece. But can you talk a little bit about your experience with that mentorship piece of it?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I love that you asked this question because mentorship is something that I am very passionate about. And it's funny that you ask about my manager at the time because I don't think even back then I was really looking for a mentor or even really knew what a mentor was. It was more of a, hey, my manager said, oh, I might be good at that. And that really triggered some, aha moments for me. Um, for me, having that mentoring, especially that early on in my career, has really meant a lot, and it has had a profound impact on my career trajectory, some of the choices I've made. I have some great mentors to this day still that I really look up to that have really been able to provide me this unique perspective that I wouldn't have otherwise gained without them. And I think that is really the value of mentoring is that your mentors can give you this non-biased feedback, give you kind of this outsider perspective on what they think you're good at or where there might be opportunities you haven't considered, or even just ask you some questions that might trigger some inner reflection. So that has happened on a number of times throughout my career, throughout different periods. It really has just been immensely valuable to me. And in more recent years, yes, I've been being more involved in being a mentor myself. I can think of a few examples of team members that I've mentored. And on the mentoring side, it's really fun for me to be able to have grown my career to this point where now I can mentor others. It really gives me the sense of being able to give back and provide value to someone. And it's really fun to see someone else grow as a result of just some of the lessons that you're sharing with them. And I do think that mentoring can be really, really impactful. I have seen people that have taken advantage of it and just do amazing things. The people that don't pursue mentoring, tend to do. And I think that having that insight, that outsider's perspective, can be just very valuable. And I've had a few people come up to me that have seen some of the career changes that I have made and have asked me, how did I do that? You know, that it was something that they were considering doing, and being able to share those learnings with them for me was very impactful. And it does make me feel as though I'm able to leave someone else with something that I learned that I found valuable. So it's very satisfying to be able to help someone with that as they're navigating those changes too. So yeah, I truly believe in the value of mentoring. I think it has an amazing impact for a lot of people.
Yeah, I'm glad that you gave that. I mean, again, it's such a simple example, but I'm glad that you gave that example of sometimes someone just like asking a question like, how'd you do that? How'd you get to that? Because sometimes I wonder if this idea of mentorship or like giving back in that kind of a way feels like it needs to be this like formal thing where like you're coming up with a plan and you're going to your manager with like notes and you're like, I officially request for you to be my mentor and we're gonna meet one time a month and you're gonna review my goals and like it doesn't have to be that. It can just be someone that like can give you that insight for you to be able to have a conversation with and ask to be like, hey, what do you think? What do you think
Yeah,
about this? Or how do I get here? Or like, I can think of plenty of people. I mean, this entire Capitalism for Good project is essentially me like going to people being like, how'd you get to where you are? Can I learn from you? What's going on? And like sometimes
yeah.
it doesn't have to be so like rigid and official for you to be able to like serve in that role.
I agree. And I appreciate that you made that point too, because I know that tends to be me too, as I think of mentoring, it has to be this formal program. And there are programs like that that are
100%.
fantastic.
Uh-huh.
I've been involved with a few of those of them, and they are, but it doesn't have to be that. In fact, that can be kind of an uncomfortable thing for people to get into. It feels awkward to formally ask someone if they can be your mentor. It does. It can feel a little bit uncomfortable. And that's just not for everyone to do that. But I can tell you, especially based on the past history I've had, when I've gone to someone and just asked a question of, hey, how did you do that? Or I'm curious about that. People are so willing to share. They really are. If they see someone that is genuinely curious and wants to learn, I have not been turned down by a single person I've ever asked. Now I know there are some grumpy people out there, and maybe someone would say, no, I'm not going to answer you, but I have not had that experience. And I've asked many, many, many different people, how did they do something, or just get curious. And I think that's the thing that is really simple about it, is just get curious. Let your curiosity lead you. Ask one question. If you find someone that you admire that did something that you think is kind of cool, just ask them about it. Most people are more than willing to share their story, and it can grow from there. It might not. I've definitely asked those one-off questions, and then that was it, and
Right.
that's fine. You still usually learn something out of that, but sometimes those questions can lead to something more. I have asked those questions before that then did turn into more of a formal mentoring relationship. So you never know, but you have to be curious enough and brave enough to ask that initial question. It doesn't have to be a formal process. Just start by asking that one question that triggers your curiosity, and see what the person says.
Love that so much. Okay, so in kind of thinking about like mentorship and evolution and how lifelong learners and your personality of like always kind of looking at what the lay of the land is, like what are your thoughts on like where you're going next, where Tipton Franklin's going next, maybe both, either one?
Yeah. So for Tipton Franklin, I'd say for us, what drives us and what gets us excited is continuing to drive impact for the clients that we're working with. So helping them elevate their presence, achieving these goals, whether it's for their revenue or they're getting the support they need to grow their business, whatever it is, that's what gets me excited. And I am so excited to help more startups achieve this next level and their growth, whatever that looks like. I get so passionate and excited about elevating great science, and that is what I will continue to do. So that is what gets me excited. It's what keeps me up with excitement at night at times, is just thinking about what are those possibilities and what can we do with that. I truly believe science makes the world a better place, and whatever I can do to continue to elevate science is where I'll be focused. I'm also really passionate. I love that you asked this question about mentoring. I always dream of leaving the world a better place than it was when I got into it. And I think not only can I do that by elevating science, but I can also do that by just simply elevating others, whether it's colleagues I work with or someone I'm mentoring or my children, whatever that is. So I get excited about making their lives even a little bit better, even if it's just making a funny joke and making their day a little bit brighter. It starts with that, right? Sometimes it doesn't have to be the big stuff. It can be the little stuff too. And that's still just as meaningful.
Yeah. Can I ask you from like an internal perspective, about you said something about like those ideas and thinking about what's next are the things that keep you up in the middle of the night. And like I think that just the keep you up in the middle of the night or like waking up in the middle or just like not being able to shut things down, like especially for folks like you who are an entrepreneur who are just running your own business, like it's difficult to find a balance when you're striving for this like stability and growth and you're trying to figure out all these different things. You're also in a unique position that you're relating to these small business owners that are also doing the same thing. Like, how do you as a person like find that balance or be able to like check off or deal with the fact that like folks like us and probably most everyone in their own right. Like it's difficult sometimes to like turn your brain off and to be a little like, how do you deal with all of the chaos of the world?
Yeah, I agree. It is a challenge. This is something where actually I admire my husband a lot
Mm.
because he's really, really good at doing this. I struggle with this a little bit more. My husband is a counselor and I really respect, admire his work, but the work that he does is also really hard. I mean, he's listening to some of the worst of people's struggles day in and day out. And to this day, I tell him, I don't know how you do it. That is one thing that, again, I respect and admire. I could not do because I just would not be able to turn my brain off. I'd be thinking
Mhm.
about this poor person going through whatever it was. And that would be really hard for me to shut off. So yes, he does that better than I do. What I do is I have a set of routines for myself that really helps. Something that I've worked on, especially in more recent years, is I've done a lot of mindset work on myself, and that's something that's been really helpful. So I have a good mindset and self-care routine. There are certain things that I do to take care of myself, both physically, mentally, spiritually, all of that, that really helps me stay in track and it helps me stay focused on the things that I need to focus on. I did learn the hard way around the early COVID years that um, I was a bit of a workaholic. And in fact, it's still one of those things that sneaks up on me. I am. I'm just so passionate about the work that I do. It's hard to shut my brain off.
Huh.
But I realized that at a certain point, I was working so much and doing too many things that I was just starting to fall apart, and I was starting to go into burnout. And thankfully, it was my husband that said, "You need to do something about this. This isn't healthy." That finally made me realize, okay, something needs to change. And I did, and I do now have a set of things that I do for myself that help keep me in a healthier routine, that help support my mindset. I do think for me, that's things like going to yoga and going for runs. It might be reading a book or playing a video game or just going for a walk, even, or spending time at the coast with my family. I think that balance, yes, is hard to achieve. And I very frequently find myself needing to refine that balance. But those routines and those things that I continue to do really do help with that.
Yeah. I think it's so important to talk about things like that. And thanks for talking about like your own personal side of it because especially for those people who are like yourself, driven by like a mission or this need to also like uplift the people around them in the community, like it can get a little like all consuming and it just that leads to burnout. I find even in the research for this project, it breaks my heart a little bit in how often I am told about like a really great business or a really great leader and they're recommended to me. And then I start researching and I find out that business is closed, or I found out that person's like, yeah, I just got really burnt out and now I'm doing, and they just had to like take a step away from it, because I think people who are leading with that kind of mentality, like it can take a personal toll on you, and that
Yeah.
I think it's important to show that like that is a part of it, but also to talk about it so that we can all like learn from one another and be like, okay, well, we're all in this together and it's not a life and death, even though it kind of feels like it sometimes. And like it's gonna be okay at the end of the day.
Yeah.
I just think that that is really important, and especially from the perspective of like looking at a community of other folks who might be a little bit like-minded. And you know, I realize I have a 14 million more questions that I could ask you, Angela. I say this probably in every interview that I've done so far, but I truly mean it. I think that it's so important to talk about these things, but like at some point we've got to wrap stuff up. So I'm gonna force myself to wrap up here and ask my final question, which is, who is another business and or leader that you see out there in the world that's doing things the right way? And it could be anyone from an old boss of yours, a client of yours, someone that you're a customer of, absolutely anyone that you think deserves a shout out.
Yeah, so I think what I'll do for a shout out for this time is I haven't been very closely involved with this organization, but I'd like to be more involved and I admire it from afar. Is it's a nonprofit called Compassion First, and they focus on really helping girls, most of which are trafficked. And this is an area where I struggle with a little bit because I get when I start to hear about these stories, it makes me feel just really sad because there are some of these people that are just stuck in these really awful situations and in a lot of ways just never really had a chance. And it's not right for them that it happens. It's very sad. It's very tragic. It takes a massive toll. But all that to say that Compassion First is doing a lot to help these children that have been trafficked and have been really able to do a lot to turn some of these girls' lives around in ways that you wouldn't even imagine. And some of these stories are really uplifting. They start in some pretty dark places, but it is amazing and profound to see what they can do for these children. And it does make you feel good that at least they can impart some good on these poor children that suffered and struggled with so much. So I think that organizations like Compassion First are doing a lot to make the world a better place, and that is something else that I aim to inspire and do for others as well, is help uplift those that are making those positive changes, especially in places like that where they're so badly needed.
Yeah. Thanks so much for giving a shout out to them. I'll make sure that they have a link in the show notes if anyone else wants to check them out, support them, get involved in some kind of a way. And then just thank you so much for doing this. Thank you so much for talking to me. This is just so great. And I love talking to folks like you. And I just wish you all the best. And I'm going to say it for the 14th millionth time. Thank you so much for doing this.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks for having me here, Andrea. It's been really great to talk to you, and you've had some really great questions. So really had me thinking on some of these things, which is really great, and I appreciate it.
Thank you so much to every single person that's listened, every single person that has told someone else about it, that has shared an episode, that has sent a blog post to someone else to read, that shares on social media, that responds back to me, that engages and lets me know what they think and what they're hearing. Thank you so much to everyone who has subscribed through the Patreon. These subscriptions are what fund the project and keep it going. There's so many different tiers available, starting at $1 and $2 a month, and each tier gets you access to different kinds of things. So, for example, the $2 a month listener tier gets you access to interviews on Thursdays, so early access to the audio and video versions of interviews that are out every Thursday, typically in the evening time. Your $3 a month member tier adds on these weekly between the interview series on Mondays. That's what I gave a little sneak peek. There are some early examples of those between the interviews that were posted on the main feed, so that folks could kind of get a lay of the land and what's behind the motivation for this project. Those reflection episodes are still going every Monday, and the folks in that member tier are still have access to those things. The VIP tier has access to merch. I really do my best to give back to those that are joining. So check the show notes for the link to the Patreon. There's a lot there if you're interested in any of the behind the scenes of like how this project gets made from the back end. Like if you are someone who is interested in starting anything that looks similar to this, whatever your topic is, like I am really open, just like I'm asking these folks that I'm interviewing about like the mistakes that they made. I do my best to be very open about the mistakes and the lessons learned that I made, plus the resources that really helped me, the people that I'm looking up to. Like I yeah, why not share my experience there? So that's all available there. And just in general, I truly want to hear from you. So please, please message me on Instagram, message me on the Patreon, leave me a review that tells me what you think of it. Email me your thoughts and your suggestions, including the things that you don't like. I got tough skin, people. You can tell me the things that I need to improve upon. I am very open about early days, early stage, that I this entire project and almost everything that goes into it is brand spanking new to me. And I am learning, not just from these leaders that I'm interviewing, but I'm learning about the technical side of things. I'm learning about social media. I'm learning about advertising. Like, I'm learning about all of these types of things, and I am happy to share what I have learned as well. And so I want your feedback. I want the things that I'm not talking about that you want to hear about that is within this Capitalism for Good space. So reach out to me. I want to hear from you. I truly do. Send me your thoughts and I'll do your research. Like I said, I really am listening and kind of creeping to see where people are coming from, where you're located, what your interests are. And so if there's an industry or an interest of yours that I haven't hit on that you are really interested, like, send me your thoughts. If you have a question that is related to this Capitalism for Good project, I'll do the research here. So send them on over. I'm already doing it. I might as well do something that fits what you're asking for and what you're looking for. Finally, my last little plug and shout out here is if you are interested in working together to build better community, check out the business website for CFG. It's at capitalism-for-good.com. There's also a link down in the show notes. And whether you are interested in starting or expanding a community give back initiative with your company, if you want to plan a volunteer day and you don't want someone that's already your full-time employee taking away from their normal job to do it, if you're looking for a charity partner within a specific space or that aligns cleanly with your company values and your philosophy, or if you want to perhaps talk about some education around the value of community partnerships and what that can add to your business if done well and done efficiently and effectively, I would love to help. So I'd be happy to get on a phone call, see how CFG can help you with your community goals. Once again, would love to hear from you if you've got thoughts, needs, questions, interest anywhere within that space. I truly believe that we are stronger when we work together and that we can truly make a really impactful, positive future if we just put all our brains and our skills together and leverage those things to build better community. So, all right, that's enough. Let's go leave this place better than we found it.